To join Ireland's most elite warriors, the first thing they tested was your mind. You had to memorize 12 books of poetry, every single word. These men were some of the most unique soldiers you've ever heard of. They divorced themselves from their families, legally became kinless. They lived half the year in the forest, like wolves. Their king was raised by a she-wolf. Their greatest leader was fed wolf's milk as a child. And that leader, his name was Fionn Mac Cumhaill, and he had to kill a fire-breathing demon to earn his throne. After the battle, he gained the power to see the future by sucking on his thumb. I'll explain that, I promise. But there's something else you need to know. This story doesn't end with glory. It ends with the entire warrior brotherhood destroying itself in a civil war, and the one survivor, when he finally came home 300 years later and his feet touched the ground. He aged 3 centuries in 3 seconds and crumbled to dust. So by the end of this video, you're going to understand why poetry was more important than strength, how a man defeated a fire demon using poison fumes, why jealousy turned the greatest hero in Ireland into a murderer. This is the story of the Fianna, Ireland's wolf warriors, the berserkers nobody talks about. And it starts with a test that sounds absolutely insane. You show up, you're strong, you're fast, you've trained your whole life for this. They sit you down and hand you a book. Prove you've memorized all 12 of these, word for word. Every genealogy, every legend, every poem, the entire cultural memory of Ireland has to be stored in your head. This is genius, by the way, because they weren't looking for thugs. They were filtering for something almost impossible to find, a warrior who could recite epic poetry by the campfire at night and then deflect 9 spears the next morning without flinching. Which brings us to the second test. They dig a hole deep enough to bury you up to your waist. You're stuck, can't dodge, can't run. They hand you a shield and a wooden staff. That's it. 9 warriors form a circle around you. Each one has a spear, and they all throw at once, different angles, coming at your head, your chest, your arms. If one spear touches you, just grazes you, you fail. This test is about staying calm when your lizard brain is screaming at you to panic, about spatial awareness when 9 sharp objects are flying at your skull, and if you somehow survive that. Now they test if you're part animal. They braid your hair tight, give you a head start of 1 tree, and then the best trackers in Ireland start hunting you through the forest like your prey. 3 rules. Break any one, you fail. 1. You cannot crack a single twig. Total silence. If they hear even 1 branch snap under your foot, it's over. 2. Not a single braid can come loose. No branch can snag your hair. You have to move through the forest so gracefully that nature itself doesn't even notice you're there. 3. Your clothes can't be torn, and obviously you can't be caught, but they're not done with you yet. This is my favorite because it sounds like someone made it up as a joke. You're running, full speed, and while you're at maximum velocity, you have to intentionally step on a thorn, reach down, pull it out of your foot, and never slow down, not even a little. Can't break stride. So let's add this up. To join the Fianna, you had to prove you were a poet who could memorize 12 books, fearless when buried alive with spears flying at you, silent and graceful as a predator, and calm and precise even in agony. The Fianna were looking for the most complete human beings who ever lived. And once you were in, once you passed all of that, that's when your life got really weird. When you joined the Fianna, you also left everything else. You divorced your family, legally. They called you Ekland, meaning kinless man. You were no longer bound by tribal law. You existed outside civilization. For half the year, May to October, you were required to live in the wilderness. Just you, your warband, and the wild. You hunted your own food, slept under stars, became feral. And when I say feral, I mean it, literally. The Fianna were obsessed with wolves. King Cormac Mac Airt, their greatest patron, was raised by a she-wolf in a cave. He could understand wolf speech. Fionn Mac Cumhaill himself was fed wolf's milk as a child. His favorite war-hound slept in his bed. He commanded 500 hounds. One of his warriors described the howling of wolves as music. Now here's where this stops being a fairy tale and becomes reality. All over Ireland, there are these rectangular pits in the ground. They're called Fulacht Fiad, meaning deer roasting pits, and they're proof the Fianna actually existed. Here's how they worked. Dig a trench in low ground where it fills with water. Build a massive fire. Heat stones until they're glowing. Drop them into the water, and the water erupts into a boiling frenzy. Then wrap joints of venison in straw, drop them in, and let them braise. Bronze Age field cooking. These pits exist. You can visit them. But what makes a legend isn't just how you live. It's what you do. And the greatest of them all was a man who earned his throne by poisoning himself. Let me tell you how Fionn Mac Cumhaill became leader of the Fianna. Every year, on Samhain, Ireland's version of Halloween, a creature from the other world would attack Tara, the seat of the High King, the most sacred place in Ireland. For 23 years in a row, this thing had burned it to the ground. His name was Aillén the Burner. First, he'd play a harp, beautiful, haunting fairy music, and everyone who heard it, every guard, every warrior, the king himself, would fall into a magical sleep. Then, once the entire capital was defenseless, Aillén would open his mouth and breathe fire. 23 years. No one could stop him. Then a young man named Fionn stepped forward. He wasn't the leader yet. He was a nobody, but he had a plan. He borrowed a magical spear, the spear of Fianna, venomous. The blade itself gave off toxic fumes. And here's the genius part. When Aillén began to play and the magic sleep started creeping over everyone, Fionn pressed the burning, poisoned spearhead against his own forehead and inhaled the fumes, the stench. The acrid chemical burn of the poison. It was so horrible, so overwhelming, that it snapped him wide awake. So, while everyone else in Tara slept, Fionn stood there, alone, awake, in agony, waiting. Aillén, thinking he was unopposed, began to exhale his fire. And in that split second, Fionn hurled the spear straight through his back, through his heart, dead. That single act of calculated suffering won Fionn the leadership of the Fianna, the willingness to poison himself to stay conscious. But that's not where his power came from. Remember, I said Fionn could see the future by sucking his thumb. Here's how that happened. When Fionn was young, he studied under a poet named Finnegas. Finnegas spent 7 years trying to catch a legendary fish from the river Boyne, the Salmon of Knowledge. Prophecy said whoever first tasted it would gain all the wisdom in the world. Finnegas finally catches it, tells young Fionn, "Cook this for me, but do not, under any circumstances, eat even the smallest piece." So Fionn's cooking this fish over a searing hot stone, and a blister of fat bursts, burns his thumb. Without thinking, Fionn sticks his burnt thumb in his mouth, and in that instant, all the knowledge of the world floods into him. An accidental taste, a moment of instinct, and he became a prophet warrior. From that day on, whenever Fionn needed to see the truth, to glimpse the future, to uncover hidden enemies, all he had to do was bite his thumb of knowledge. However, Fionn wasn't perfect. He was powerful, wise, a legend, but he was also deeply, tragically human, and that's where this story breaks your heart. Fionn got old, and when he got old, he decided he wanted a young, beautiful wife. Her name was Gráinne, daughter of the High King, and when she arrived at her own betrothal feast and saw Fionn for the first time, she was horrified. He was older than her father, so she looked around the room, and her eyes landed on Diarmuid and Gráinne, Fionn's best warrior, his nephew, a man born with a magic love spot on his forehead that made him irresistible to any woman who saw it. She drugged everyone in the hall, everyone except Diarmuid, and while everyone was asleep, she confessed her love. Diarmuid refused, out of loyalty to Fionn, so Gráinne placed a geese on him, a magical curse. She forced him, through supernatural compulsion, to run away with her. Years of running, hiding. Eventually, there was a reconciliation, on the surface, but Fionn never forgave. Years later, Fionn organized a boar hunt. He knew two things. One, Diarmuid was cursed never to harm a boar. Two, a specific magic boar was fated to kill him. So Fionn led him right to it. The boar gored Diarmuid. Mortal wound. And here's the thing. Fionn had a gift. Anyone who drank water from his cupped hands would be instantly healed. Diarmuid, bleeding out on the ground, begged his leader for water. Fionn walked to a well, cupped the water, walked back, and let it slip through his fingers. He did it again, cupped the water, walked back, let it spill. His own son and grandson drew swords and threatened to kill him on the spot. Shamed, Fionn went a third time. But when he returned, Diarmuid was already dead. The greatest hero in Ireland, the warrior poet prophet who defeated fire demons and gained infinite wisdom, was also a bitter old man who murdered his best friend out of jealousy. And that's what makes this real. Because Fionn's flaws didn't just destroy one man. They destroyed everything. The Fianna got too powerful, too arrogant. When the High King was marrying off his daughter, Fionn demanded such an outrageous tribute that the king said, "I'd rather die fighting you than pay this." So Ireland split. Civil war. The Battle of Gabhra. A bloodbath. Fionn's grandson, Oscar, the greatest warrior of the new generation, faced the High King in single combat. Oscar killed him, but as he struck the killing blow, the king's spear went through his chest. And when Fionn saw his grandson die, he wept for the first and only time in the entire saga. Fionn Mac Cumhaill wept, not for Diarmuid, not for anyone else, only for Oscar. And then Fionn himself was killed. The Fianna were shattered. Their age was over, but one man survived. Fionn's son, Oisín, wasn't at the battle. Years before, he'd been lured away by a fairy princess named Niamh. She took him to Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth, a place where no one aged, no sorrow, no death. Oisín lived there in paradise. After what felt like 3 years, he got homesick. He wanted to see his father, his friends, Ireland. let him go, but she gave him one warning. If your feet touch Irish soil, you'll never return. Oisín rode back to Ireland, and nothing was the same. 300 years had passed. The Fianna were gone. The castles were ruins. The people were small and weak, following a new god. St. Patrick walked the land. Oisín rode through this strange world, a giant from a forgotten age, unrecognizable and alone. Then he saw men struggling to move a boulder. He scoffed, leaned from his saddle to move it with one hand. The saddle strap snapped. He fell. The moment his feet touched the ground, 300 years caught up with him. The men watched in horror as this magnificent warrior withered before their eyes. His skin wrinkled, his hair went white, his muscles wasted away. In seconds, he became a shriveled old man, lying in the dirt. The last wolf warrior, the final echo of an age that no longer existed. They brought him to St. Patrick. He told the saint the stories of the Fianna. So here's why this story matters. The Fianna were Ireland's version of the Norse Ulfhednar, the same archetype, young men who divorced themselves from civilization and lived like wolves, channeling something primal and dangerous and necessary. But what makes them different is they demanded more than violence. You had to be a poet, a thinker, graceful even in battle, and in the end they destroyed themselves, not because of an invading army, but because they became corrupt, because they abandoned their own code. Truth in our hearts, strength in our arms, honesty in our speech. When they forgot that, they fell. Fionn wasn't a villain, but jealousy turned him into one. The Fianna weren't monsters, but arrogance destroyed them, and Oisín outlived the world he loved and crumbled to dust the moment he tried to come home. If you want more stories like this, let me know in the comments. I've got about 10 more ready to go. Please hit like on my video.